For the kind introduction, and thank you, Laguna Woods. It's great to be back. And I want to give a shout out to your leadership here. I remember back in 2016, I believe Laguna Woods at that point was considered a Republican bastion. And by 2018, you flipped it Democratic, and we haven't looked back. And if you look today at the results from any past election, it's this bright blue dot in the middle of Orange County. And you have managed to overperform year after year, and it's great to see the enthusiasm, the continued membership here. And I've gotten to know many of you over the years. For those of you who don't know me, I was not always a political hack. Before 2018, I was a law professor at UC Irvine raising my 3 young kids. Now they are much bigger. Teddy has actually passed me in height. That's not a high bar, I know. But he's about 5'9". He's 15 years old, going into his sophomore year. And Emmy, who many of you have met, is 13, very precocious, likes to go to concerts like Taylor Swift and the upcoming Olivia Rodrigo concert in the Great Park in Irvine. And Paxton's very much into gaming right now. But I had the privilege of becoming elected in 2024 to represent the 47th Congressional District in Congress. And unfortunately that meant I was no longer representing Laguna Woods. And I felt that dearly because I've really gotten to know and love so many of you and what you stand for. And the amazing thing about this room is the wealth of experience and the high degree of passion and engagement that you all have, because you could be doing anything in your golden years. You've had careers, you've lived lives, you have children, grandchildren. You could be doing anything, but you've chosen to be active, not because you care about the country for yourselves, but because you care about the country we're leaving behind for the next generation. And I care deeply about that, as well as the father of 3 young kids. I'm deeply concerned about what's happening in this country, and yes, that predates Donald Trump. But this last year and a half, as we all know in this room, has been really an unprecedented and very depressing and very trying time for our country. Now, as I was saying to you, a few of you on the way in, and I'm sorry, I got about 3 tables in before I got ushered into my table, but hopefully we'll get a chance to talk with all of you. The playbook for a freshman member of Congress, particularly one who just won one of the closest races in the country, as I did in 24, is pretty laid out. You're supposed to keep a low profile, not raise any waves, focus on raising money and defending the seat. But as it became clear in the opening hours of the Trump administration, when he fired 19 inspectors general, when he hired illegally Elon Musk to go out and illegally fire thousands of federal employees and go in and redirect funds that Congress had appropriated, I think it became clear at that moment that we were seeing something very different than we'd ever seen in America before. And so I made the case to our leadership on the Democratic side that I needed to be outspoken. And I think if you've been following me, you've seen that whether it was coming out aggressively and authoring the first bill trying to fire Elon Musk from the federal government, the Bad Doge Act, whether it was going after the illegal weaponization of the federal agencies against law firms, against private companies, against media companies and the like, whether it was the illegal activities and brutality and immorality of ICE, or the Iran war, or on and on and on, you've seen me being extremely outspoken and trying to do all we can to slow this thing down. And I've become convinced over the last year and a half that what we're seeing right now in real time is Donald Trump, and more importantly, his inner circle, trying to create here in America what we've seen unfold in other countries, in places like Turkey, in places like Hungary, in places like Venezuela. They are clearly following an authoritarian playbook. And so I've had the privilege over the last year of working with and talking to a lot of authoritarianism experts. Ruth Ben-Ghiat and I have become good friends. Timothy Snyder came down to Washington, D.C. to address a group of us. We've had Ruth Ben-Ghiat, and Erica Chenoweth out of Harvard, and they've all been very clear. They believe America can be saved, but we need to take drastic action. We need to step up and fight back with everything we have, but we have to go further, and I think we have to win this election But what Timothy Snyder told a group of us is something like the following. I believe you're going to win this upcoming 2026 election because Donald Trump is so unpopular. And yes, he will do everything to try to lie, cheat, and steal, because that's what authoritarians do. But I think you're going to win back the House and maybe even the Senate this year. But he also cautioned that if you Democrats do what you always do, which is nothing, you push for incremental change after you get elected, you will lose again. And the next time you lose will be the last time. And so I want to leave you with those words because we have a lot of work to do. I think as I get around, even here in Orange County, and I talk to people, so many people right now believe that the American experiment is one that is dead. They don't believe in the American dream. There's a sense of urgency that particularly young people have, that they will not have it better than their parents, that they will never be able to afford to buy a home, that they can't afford to raise kids. They don't believe that this country offers them any kind of opportunity. And unless we are listening, and whether it's the DSA elections that are happening across the country, whether it's Trump's 2 elections in 2016 and 24, we should be taking heed of that warning that I think it's long past time that the Democratic Party push for incremental change. We have to now adapt, and these don't have to be radical solutions, but we need to be bold and aggressive in how we talk about the situations that average Americans face and the solutions that we're offering them. And I just want to take that to heart. So that is my message to you. I will close with this, and then I want to take questions, and I'll leave a lot of time for that. Everyone always asks me, what gives you hope right now? And what gives me hope, honestly, is that there's so much engagement. And I look around this room and I see the incredible diversity of people, of experiences. You all have lived all across the country, some of you from around the world. But we see this at our No Kings rallies. I know I've seen Katrina Foley and Chris Cluey at a lot of these No Kings rallies. I see this at different events that we're doing politically. I lived through 2018, as I know a lot of you did. And engagement right now is clearly much higher than it was in 2018. And if we keep that momentum up, I believe we can enact the fundamental changes we need to not just push back Donald Trump, but to transform this country, to make people believe again in America, to give them hope. I believe we can do all that, but it starts now. It starts with this election. We have a chance to reclaim part of our country right now and to stop the fascism that we're seeing in this country. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to taking your questions. And if there are no questions, I'm happy to just sit down. Oh, are we doing this off cards? Or?
Questions, please write them on the cards, and I will come around and pick them up.
I think we don't know we use this.
Should we have 2 mics?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Should I just take this one off?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I just have to figure out how to turn this thing on. Okay.
Could we just pass this one back and forth?
No,
Okay.
I think this is working. Okay, the first one I have here is when the House wins in November, will you and others House Dems stay in D.C. until lots of the damage is fixed?
I'm sorry, this is a question. We'll stay in D.C. till then?
Lots of the damage is fixed.
I will stay in D.C. as long as I can when it's appropriate. Obviously, I want to come back home and see my family, which is down here, as much as I can as well. For those of you who don't know, I fly back every weekend. My family's still here. My kids are still in school here. So I'm typically out in D.C. when we're in session from Monday through Thursday. I come back Thursday evening. I typically don't see my kids that night because they're in bed by the time I get home. But Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are my time with my family, and then Monday morning I'm back out on another flight. Of course, if we have work to do, I will stay in Washington, D.C. When we had the government shutdown, and Mike Johnson refusing to convene Congress, a group of us as Democrats made a commitment to being in Washington every week. So during that period, I flew up every week to Washington, D.C., even though we were not officially in session. We had hearings, we had rallies, we were doing different things to try to highlight some of the damage that things like H.R. 1 were doing to our country. And I will continue to do all I can in Washington, D.C. to try to foment the change that we need. But being back home is important, not just so that I can see my kids, but also so I can hear from my constituents, so we can highlight the local issues as well. And also because I am elected every 2 years to try to make sure that we're engaging with enough people so that I'm in good position to hopefully defend this seat again.
Thank you. In 2027 and on, what are the Democrats in Congress doing to investigate his grift, corruption, and money laundering?
That's a great question. And I will tell you right now, just speaking very candidly, so the question was, what are we going to do to investigate Trump's unprecedented corruption? And there's a little bit of a divide right now. I think everyone wants to investigate the corruption, but how far do we want to focus on that? How much do we want to focus on that is a question that's a little bit in debate right now. There are those in the Democratic Party, to be candid, who want us just to talk about affordability, to focus on cost of living and quality of life issues for households, believing the economics are the main issue people care about. I am not in that camp. I very firmly believe we have to walk and chew gum, that we have to hold people accountable for breaking the law. As someone who started my career as a federal prosecutor, I believe firmly we have to enforce the rule of law right now. We can't let people get away with such blatant violations of the rule of law. It's one of the reasons I'm working on the pardons issue right now. If you haven't seen, Senator Peter Welch from Vermont and I have been very active on the alleged pay-to-play bribery scheme around Trump's pardons. We're pushing for more disclosure. We're pushing legislation right now that would require that type of disclosure. Who's getting paid? What are the access points? What are the impacts on victims? I'm also separately right now pushing forward an op-ed that will make a couple discrete points, including one, that the president's pardon power is not unchecked. There's no such thing as an absolute presidential power. Even his powers as commander-in-chief have significant guardrails around them. Two, that any preemptive pardons that Trump issues should have no binding force of law. Because if you've been following, you know that Donald Trump has basically quietly promised a lot of people, hey, I'm going to give you pardons. Basically, go break the law on my behalf and you'll get off scot-free. Now, if you read the Constitution, there is no mention of preemptive pardons, and the mention of pardons is in the context of commutations of sentences. There is no case law that says that you can issue a preemptive pardon, and there's no logical reason to think that you can pardon someone for something they haven't been indicted, let alone convicted of. So we're going to make that case because we want people who are thinking about breaking the law to know you're going to get prosecuted, you're going to suffer the consequences, so maybe you shouldn't break the law. But to go back to the question, we are having that debate internally in the Democratic caucus right now. I believe that the tide is shifting, particularly with some of these wins from more liberal candidates. I think a lot of the folks that might be more mindful about making waves, they're now realizing that maybe they need to be seen as more active to try to win their primaries next cycle. And so I think hopefully we'll see in 27 people being very aggressive on the rule of law.
Okay, thank you. How can you say you support the state of Israel when you voted against offensive weapons for them?
Yeah, I actually had a group. Thank you for the question. For those of you who don't know, I came out in March of this year or so and supported something called the Block the Bombs Act, which stops the transfer, which would stop, it's not going to pass anytime soon, but it would stop the transfer of offensive heavy weaponry to the state of Israel. I voted later this year for something called the Massey Amendment, which was Amendment number 8 to the NDAA, and that effectively didn't pass, but it would have removed Israel's involvement from the Foreign Military Financing Program, which is for Israel $3.3 billion in subsidies so that they can purchase offensive weaponry. And I have told, earlier this week I met with a group of rabbis and pro-Israel advocates, and I told them the same thing I'll tell you. I support Israel unequivocally and its right to exist and defend itself. I will continue to support defensive weaponry, including the components for defensive weapon systems like Block the Bombs. But at this point, I cannot support U.S. taxpayers supporting offensive weapons to Israel, given what we're seeing happen in real time. I believe Israel's expansion of the war in Iran, what they're doing in the West Bank, and still doing in Gaza, what they've done in southern Lebanon, are counterproductive to U.S. national security interests. They're counterproductive to the long-term peace and prosperity of Israel in the Middle East. And again, I know not everyone's going to agree with that, but that is where I'm coming from. Again, I want to commit to you here. I believe strongly in Israel's right to exist. I will condemn any instances of anti-Semitism that are brought to our attention. Not anti-Semitic, not anti-Israel, but I cannot condone what is happening right now with the IDF under Netanyahu's regime.
Can we take back Congress if we keep electing progressives, not centrists?
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, what was the question? Was what exactly?
Progressives as opposed to centrists.
Should we or can we?
Can we?
Can we? Ultimately, every district's going to be a little bit different, right? So, but what we are seeing right now is progressives getting elected in a lot of places. But to me, I actually think this is not about left, center, right anymore. It's about action and inaction. And I think there have been people who've written columns along this line. And one of the things I've been urging my moderate colleagues in swing districts to do is to be more vocal, to be more aggressive, because I read these tea leaves as the same way that many people do. People want change right now. And if the only people suggesting fundamental change, the only people being aggressive and bold are the DSA folks, that's where voters are going to go. And so I think if centrists want to, quote unquote, centrists want to get elected and beat back some of this, I think they're going to have to propose big solutions to the big problems that Americans are facing right now. They're going to have to be bold and aggressive in standing up to Trump and his attacks on our democracy. And the era of sitting back quietly and raising money and just hoping that no one will notice you, that is no longer a pathway, I believe, to winning in elections.
I'm going to combine two questions here. How prepared is the Democratic Party to deal with all the expected election disruptions, and what must be done to protect voting rights?
Yeah. That's a great question and something that I have been very focused on over the last year, and I know I've talked to some of you in this room about this. It's also something that parts of our leadership in the Democratic House caucus have been focused on. And so about this time last year, I would say June or so of last year, I started talking to colleagues in the caucus about our elections in 26 and my concerns that Trump, following the fascist playbook that other authoritarians have followed, would try to tamper with our elections. I've seen nothing since that time to disabuse me of the notion that he will try to lie, cheat, and steal on this election. And I quietly raised to people like Rob Bonta, Governor Newsom, House leadership, the idea that in California, where so many swing seat elections might take place, that Gavin Newsom might consider activating our National Guard to be on standby so that he could have them ready to go if there was any federal interference. And as importantly, go to court preemptively to get a court order saying that Donald Trump did not have the requisite grounds to take over our National Guard, which I think he'll try to do. That idea and many others have been floated. Joe Morelli from New York is the head of our top Democrat on that House Administration Committee, and he also, around the same time, was very worried about our election security this year. And so he reached out to leadership. He's much more senior than I am. I'm a freshman, which means I'm basically sitting at the kids' table. He's very senior, but he and I got to talking, and it turns out he has decided, at that point in time, he decided to lead real efforts to talk with the attorneys general. I think there's like 27 of them that are actively involved in discussions. I've been part of some of those discussions. We recently held a wargaming exercise where we had something like 100 Democratic members and 100 or so senior lawyers, former DOJ staff, some very top-notch people like deputy AGs under Obama and under Biden, participate in exercises for like about 5 hours where we gamed out different scenarios of what Trump might do. They've come up with something like 212 potential scenarios based on past precedents here in the United States and elsewhere and potential responses. Now, we can't, we know there's things that might happen that we might not have the grounds to respond to, but we're trying to think through this proactively. There are real meaningful efforts in place to try to combat this, and I think the key point that I have tried to impress, that Joe Morelli has tried to impress, is that we have to be proactive and not reactive. We don't want to be the ones in court on election day responding to bad actions. We want to be ahead of time in court, making sure that Trump and his administration can't do the things they want to do. But I will just add to that, and I apologize for the interjection. The best thing we can do this year is to vote early. Because you can track your ballots here in Orange County. We know that this year, I think in Orange County, there were several thousand ballots that were not counted, even though they appeared to have been mailed on election day, because the post office didn't process them in time. And we know that that's been a trend across the country. I expect it will be exacerbated this year as the post office continues to probably illegally mess around with our ballots. I think they may try a lot of other stuff. So send your ballots early, track them. The general election ballot should be an easy one for you guys. Hopefully you'll just vote for me and Katrina and a few others. And it's not like the primary ballot where you had a lot of different choices. So vote early, track your ballot, tell your friends, everyone you know except the Republicans to vote early.
Okay, one of the ways Trump plans to steal the 2026 midterms, recently talked about, but without a strategy to push back, is that Trump will order Mike Johnson to, and he will, order the GOP House majority to refuse to certify Democratic winners. What can Dems do to push back?
Yeah, we've actually, so as part of the election exercises, some of the scenarios I mentioned were after the elections were certified or in the process of certification. And you may have seen there's a New York Times headline, I think, or maybe LA Times this week, about how a growing number of people in elections offices around the country are election deniers. So we're very aware that this is a possibility, that you might have local clerks refusing to certify elections, that Mike Johnson himself might not certify the results. Now, the thing that's kind of tricky, and I don't know all the ins and outs of this, Johnson doesn't get to certify the election. It's the House clerk that does. And he doesn't certify the actual election results. Those come from the different secretaries. What they do is they seat the House members. They seat the House members that have been validated as the valid winners of those elections. And so in theory, the secretary could end up deciding not to seat some or all the members. But what happens is we start over. There are no members of that once the election occurs. And so the real concern that has been floated is that maybe what happens is we say Mike Johnson fires the clerk. We don't have an actual Congress, and there's nobody in place to certify the new members of Congress. And that's never happened before, so we don't know what the circumstances might be, if the courts might get involved. So we're really getting into like gray areas here, but the only thing I can say to you is that we have been thinking about scenarios like this. We have been anticipating what might happen, because I think a lot of us, not everybody, but a lot of us in the Democratic caucus are very, very hyper aware that these guys will do anything they can to hold on to power.
Residents of Laguna Woods Village need your help. 2032 projected cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. What will you do to help us?
That's a great question. So some of you may remember, not to change the topic, but in 2020 I ran for state senate against John Morlock. And one of the things John Morlock, he's a former CPA, and as it turns out, a very bad one. But he would project out like these $50 trillion deficits in our pension funds. And what he was doing is he'd take today's like minor deficit and flash forward like 50 years. And of course, the compounding value of money being what it is, if you take like a small deficit and project it 50 years out, it's going to be a massive deficit. And so this was really dishonest accounting. And that's not to say that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, or Social Security and Medicare in particular, don't have problems. Like at this point, they are underfunded. I think they're scheduled to run out and go negative in about 10, 12 years. And that should be alarming to all of us. But this is not an unfixable problem. Minor changes right now to revenue could ensure that we are able to ensure the continued delivery of those benefits going forward. So lifting the cap a little bit on payroll fixes a lot of the problem. Not passing gigantic tax cuts for billionaires helps address the problem. Not cutting Medicaid and not cutting the ACA tax credit helps, because right now we've seen that those two actions by the Republicans are dramatically increasing all of our healthcare costs. And I was just actually at the UCI Medical Center in Orange yesterday, and they were telling me that because of these cuts, they're now having patients come in, they're having to park patients all along the hallways, because these patients don't have the ability to get into certified nursing facilities after they receive their emergency care. So they're basically receiving that post-emergency care in the hospital because they have nowhere to go and they can't be discharged because they don't have insurance, they don't have access to Medicaid, they don't have access to ACA insurance, and that is a growing problem. So we end up eating the cost. Those of us who have either employer-based health insurance or those of us on Medicare, we eat the cost because that just goes and gets transferred. I'd also just say this. I think it's long past time that Democrats started talking about taxes, not just about incremental changes, but about a wholesale overhaul of the tax system. It is fundamentally unfair at this point. I don't know if you heard this. Mark Zuckerberg apparently has declared $30,000 in income since Facebook was founded, a year. That's ridiculous. Elon Musk has declared losses. This is the type of gamesmanship that really rich people play with our tax system because there's so many loopholes. Meanwhile, we're having fights about things like the carried interest loophole, which I'm sure most of you know about, but the average American has no idea what that is. I think we start over and just say we're going to tax everything the same, no matter where the income comes from. We're going to tax it fairly with a slightly progressive rate. And by the way, most Americans will see a pretty significant tax decrease because of that. Because if we get rich people, investors, to actually pay their fair share, the rest of us will pay less. And that will also shore up programs like Social Security and Medicare. So I think at this point, my message to you again, we need to stop with the incremental changes. It needs to stop being tinkering with the existing tax code. At this point, most Americans are pissed off at the tax system. They know it's unfair. It's rigged against us. And that is why the rich get richer. And so we can have the message. I think we have the political will. We just have to make sure we push forward.
I'm going to combine these two questions. What are you planning to do after the Democrats take over the House that we will not have to say in 2 years that the Democrats did nothing again? And with that, when Democrats take back both houses, will you be able to reverse decisions, including ICE center close downs?
Gotcha. So I'm a freshman, as I said. So I'm like at the kids' table, and Congress is a lot like high school. I'll just say that. Like, you know, who do you hang out with? Are you like one of the cool kids or not? And so I think I'm kind of well liked in our caucus, but I am still a freshman. And so, you know, I'm not going to tell you I'm going to be the big guy in anything. It's going to be a set of House decisions led by Hakeem Jeffries. I hope to make a difference around the edges, including in helping to push the caucus forward and being more aggressive. In particular, I have been, you know, talking a lot to Jamie Raskin and Robert Garcia, who would be the chairs of Judiciary and Oversight, about the need to not let this blatant corruption and criminality go unaddressed, that we should leave no stone unturned and really try to go after as much of this lawlessness as we can. But again, I can't make promises as to what the overall caucus will do. I can only tell you what I'm going to try to push us to do. As far as the question of and so what was the second part of that question?
No, I already moved.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, just say, okay. We plan to pick nothing. What was the
ICE. Oh, on ICE.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So on ICE, I think we're going to be able to at least slow down, if not completely stop the lawlessness, just through a robust oversight agenda. And I can promise you that House Democrats will be very aggressive on this front. That we will control their funding, but we're going to be hauling people in before us under sworn testimony and asking them what is going on. Because the fact that, and I point this out all the time, I think Katrina and I both have strong relationships with local law enforcement. If my local police in Irvine or Costa Mesa was caught on film, like shooting someone in the face at point blank, or pepper spraying or tear gassing someone who was just, you know, holding up a sign, they would be suspended and put under investigation. And the results of that investigation, when it was concluded, would be released to the public typically. And that officer would not be put back on active duty until they were cleared. They had some legitimate reason to do what they did. Zero of that has happened with ICE agents. The only time I've ever heard of any action being taken was with the gentleman who shot and killed Alex Preddy at point blank, and I think he was suspended. I'm not aware of any investigation. I believe he was restored to active duty. These guys have created a culture of lawlessness where ICE agents can literally get away with murder with no consequences. That has to end, and I think the House can do that through the Oversight Committee, through the committee that handles immigration, through Judiciary. I also think there's other things we can do on some of the DOGE cuts and clawing back some of the funds that were illegally impounded and then rescinded by Congress. So there's actions we can take to reverse some of what the Trump administration has done and is doing. That being said, there's a lot that we can't do until we have a veto-proof majority or control the presidency. So I want to caution you all, there's things we'll be able to do if we take back the House, and particularly if we take back the Senate, but we're still going to be very limited, particularly as far as passing legislation. So we're going to try all we can, and I think a lot of us will be very creative in thinking how we can hold this administration accountable, but we will not be able to deliver everything that people want right away.
National Christianity. I consider myself a follower of Jesus Christ's teaching. In no way can we survive as a country if they are given any power.
Thank you. So I also identify as a Christian. I go to the Episcopal Church in Irvine on Branca. To me, I'll answer this in two parts. One, I think that the actions of people in this administration who call themselves Christian is deeply antithetical to any possible or plausible reading of the words and actions of Christ. That ICE is not Christian, lying as Caroline Leavitt, Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, all these people do on a daily basis in furtherance of a cruel and immoral agenda, very un-Christian. The bribery, the corruption, supporting Donald Trump, who literally is like creating golden statues in honor of himself, is very un-Christian. So the hypocrisy of these people is like mind-boggling. At the same time, I will just step back and say, as we all know in this room, there is supposed to be a firm separation of church and state. And that is completely violated under this administration. We have to restore that separation. Now, this is going to take a long time because these guys have really pushed the boundaries. I don't have all the answers, but I think we have to very firmly reestablish there's a place for religion, there's a place for government, but there has to be a sharp line between the two of those. And maybe part of what we need to do is create more legal remedies for violations of these. One of the things the Trump administration has showed over and over again is that if an administration that has no compunction about following the law is fully ensconced in the government, there's no enforcement of the law. And that's been a problem, whether it's on impoundments, whether it's on the bribery that Trump's engaged in. And so one of the things that some of us have started focusing on is, can we create private rights to action for violations so that you, the citizens of the United States, can sue and have some kind of remedy to sue these people, maybe for actual money, so that they are incentivized to actually follow the law. Because clearly, if the DOJ is not prosecuting, we're at a loss right now. So how do we get the rule of law enforced again in this country?
Okay, building on that, you mentioned Trump's narcissism. This question says, do you project that Trump's insane narcissism, naming of everything after him, will be reversed when he's gone?
Yes.
Please talk about gun violence. Are we desensitized to it?
Yes, we're becoming desensitized, and we can't be. And I also want to talk about climate a little bit, even though that was not this question. But two issues that are near and dear to my heart, climate change and gun violence prevention, have been completely swept under the table right now. And I think there's a sense among a lot of Democrats that we can't win on these, and I think people are wrong. I think people are still pissed off about gun violence. People who care about their kids' future are still deeply concerned about the effects of climate change, which are only accelerating right now. And I think that, sometimes I think Democrats take the wrong lessons away from election losses. And I've been saying to a lot of my colleagues, because the standard rule, by the way, in politics, and I think we have some people here who can speak to this, is voters can only focus on one issue at a time. So we didn't talk enough about the economy last time, so we're only going to talk about the economy this time. And I personally think that's wrong. I think we have to have multiple messages for people. And also, I think we have, as Democrats, the challenge of actually standing up and fighting for what we believe in. Because when you look at the polls about what people think about Democrats, they think we don't stand for anything and we won't fight for anything. And so what does it say about our party when the moment we lose an election, we abandon all of our long-held, deeply held positions? So I think we have to double down, if for no other reason, to show people we're going to fight. We're going to fight for you. We're going to fight for our issues. This is not just window dressing, and we're not just following the polls every single election cycle. We stand for something. We'll continue to stand for something and hope that voters will come over to us over time. But these are really, really important issues. And by the way, in poll after poll, they're also incredibly popular issues.
Okay, this is the last question, and I apologize if we didn't get to everybody's questions, but we tried to go through since there is a little bit of time in here. Will you support overturning Citizens United?
Yes. And first of all, I just want to say thank you again. I really look forward to being back here a lot, and I apologize I'm not here more right now. Just the schedule of Congress makes it challenging to be here. But we'll be back the entire month of October. I'm sure I will be back here in Laguna Woods. I look forward to seeing more of you as I hopefully represent you next year and in the coming years. Thank you all for your engagement. This is like an awesome club. I'm so grateful to the leadership here. And again, just commend you all for somehow turning this into a bright blue dot in the middle of Orange County. And I know how many doors you knock on, all the literature you distribute. But I think we have to go further than federal legislation to overturn Citizens United. We have to overhaul the Supreme Court. This Supreme Court is fundamentally bankrupt. They are very clearly ideological, and they were put in place largely by a Senate that realized that the Supreme Court could be a game changer for them. They violated a lot of rules and norms to get this court in place, and they have shown that they do not care about precedent. They do not care about the clear text of the Constitution. They will do whatever their masters want them to do. And by the way, a lot of them are also deeply corrupt and taking bribes. So we have to do something about this. There's a lot of ideas out there. There's a term limit bill, which a lot of people think is constitutional, which would basically say that we're going to create a bench of active judges and inactive judges. So we're not saying you can't be a Supreme Court justice, only that you'll be an active versus inactive justice. And after a certain number of years, I think it's 18 years, you will be an inactive justice. You'll no longer be part of the group that decides cases, unless somebody has to recuse themselves, and then maybe you'll be selected to be one of the active justices for that case. There's other proposals out there. Expanding the court is always on the table. I personally believe there's nothing in the Constitution that says the Supreme Court is the only arbiter of what the Constitution says, and that maybe we need to start standing up and saying this decision by the Supreme Court's wrong, and start saying in our legislation that this particular decision by the Supreme Court shall be given no weight, or this particular type of legislation is outside the scope of Supreme Court appellate review. But we have to start fighting fire with fire, because we have to recognize the Supreme Court is not acting in good faith. They're operating as a right-wing arm of the Republican Party, essentially another super PAC with a lot more power than that. And they have fundamentally wrecked our democracy through decisions like Citizens United, Bush v. Gore, unitary executive power. We need to stop this right now, and we have to treat this with the urgency it needs. But with that, thank you so much for having me. Sorry for so long.
Wait, everybody sit down. I lied. Please
Sorry
come
about
here
that.
so we
Sorry.
can ask you a few more
Sorry.
questions.
Sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead and have a seat, please. I lied with my last statement.
Oh.
We're going to have a few more questions from the audience. The food's not here yet, so we've got a few
Okay.
more. We've got a few more minutes.
Katrina.
So Katrina's got a question.
I have more of a comment. So many of you may not know, but the county and our congressional representatives, we work really closely together. And I want to publicly thank Congressman Min for working with us to identify gap funding for some of our public safety projects, like the harbor patrol and the building facilities and all kinds of different things here in the county. So thank you for your efforts, even in a Republican-controlled Congress, for helping us to get funding, because we really need it because of the big, bad, ugly bill that really...
And for those who didn't hear, what Supervisor Foley was saying is there's a deep partnership between federal and county, and Katrina's office has been instrumental in helping us identify where the county has needs. So we recently did a joint event where we highlighted the $2 million that we were able to find in federal funding requested by Supervisor Foley's office to refurbish and upgrade a key center for the Newport Harbor Patrol that is responsible for interdicting drugs, human trafficking, responding to environmental pollution, and just helping people who might need help who are boating or swimming or whatever else. So this is a key lifeline. We've been working together on anti-fire efforts, and she didn't say this, but I'll say this. She also needs a lot of help because she's in a tough race herself running for supervisor right now.
Okay, I'm going to come out and take a few questions from the audience. Yeah. But we're limiting the amount of questions you can ask.
What's for lunch, by the way? I'm good.
Okay, Nancy Hensel, our former vice president.
Most of us know about Project 2025, which is destroying our government, and I'm wondering what the Democratic leadership is doing to not counteract it, but if we get a new president, who's a Democrat and so forth, we can't just go back to where we were. We need to rebuild, and I'm wondering where those discussions are and what's happening there.
I'll be honest with you and say I'm worried about that. There are groups definitely trying to lead a Project 2029 effort. I'm concerned that, like a lot of left-leaning projects, so one of the ones I'm aware of is Center for American Progress, where I used to work, is leading one of the initiatives on Project 2029. But I'm concerned, and I expressed this concern when I had a lunch meeting with their president, Neera Tanden, that they can't do this the same way that CAP always does things, that every left of center group does things, by having a big tent where everybody agrees on some basic principles. Everyone has to have buy-in. But as a result, there's no meaningful detail, there's no meaningful steps. Like, this can't be a kumbaya project. It has to be something that really fixes stuff fast and aggressively, restores our governmental functions, but also does it in a way that's more efficient, that it, is more reliable, that has a vision behind it. We're going to have to act fast. I think one of the things that we're looking at in hindsight is that I think Biden passed some great legislation with IRA and BIF. But unfortunately, the money was so slow in getting out there that it just didn't arrive in time, that people end up feeling that the economy was a real problem. Even though we knew that over time, as those funds got appropriated, they would create lots of jobs. And so we can't have that happen again, where everything's slowed up because we're trying to come to consensus. So I don't know who's going to lead that, because at some point you have to piss off someone, whether it's some unions, whether it's some attorneys, different types of groups. But I think I'm hoping that whoever our presidential nominee is will help spearhead that effort of trying to lead something, because I don't know that the Democratic infrastructure is capable of direct action like that. We are herding cats. I think ultimately the presidential candidate that emerges next year and beyond, I'm hoping that candidate will lead these efforts, because we absolutely need them. We need to be thinking very creatively. Are we going to do like special government employees like Trump did to try to quickly restore governmental functions? Are we going to use private-public partnerships? Like, what types of mechanisms are we going to rely on? What are we going to prioritize? How are we going to get things out of the gate really quickly? But we need a coordinated plan, and I agree with you 100%. I just don't know who's going to lead it at this point.
Hey, thank you so much, Dave, for coming in. Great answers to the good questions. The last stuff you said after the so-called last question was really a bunch of the very most important issues, and including Supreme Court reform, including unpacking the court, term limits, senior status, and the worst of those decisions, the most lawless, the most dangerous, the one that facilitates fascism itself, was Trump v. Slaughter.
Yeah.
The unitary executive, president can fire any board member, no more independent agencies. Have you and your colleagues thought of ways to, short of unpacking the court, ways to get around that and have independent, uncorruptible, independent regulatory agencies that we've had since, the beginning of the last century? Thanks.
Yeah, and I think to add some flavor to what Jonathan's saying, as you all know, since the New Deal, we've had a lot of independent agencies where Congress has delegated some of our authorities to agencies like the EPA, and particularly independent commissions like the FEC, the SEC, and others. And what that decision essentially determined is that the president could fire at will and rehire anyone he wants, whereas historically presidents were limited. We had staggered terms, bipartisan boards, things like that, to create balance over time. That was intentional on the part of Congress because they wanted to create some independence. They wanted to create some functioning that would not necessarily switch from election to election. I don't know that there's any near-term fixes, because you would need an overwhelming majority to create new frameworks. Whatever the new commissions we devise, whatever the language we try to create to safeguard against the Supreme Court in this decision and Slaughter, that would take some pretty large majorities to be able to pass. And that's not going to happen until at least 2029 at the earliest. So I think folks are just starting to grapple with this. I think right now we're focused on winning this election, because none of this matters. If we don't win elections, we can't pass any laws. And with the Supreme Court so rigged against us right now, we can't overcome the Supreme Court. So one step at a time. I know there are legal scholars out there, and that's one of the things I think we need more of right now is legal scholars, lawyers, really thinking through some of what we can do on the Supreme Court decisions right now to overcome them in the near term. One of the suggestions I've heard that might be applicable is taking away Supreme Court appellate jurisdiction by writing in each piece of legislation, the contents of this bill shall not be reviewable by the Supreme Court. There is no appellate jurisdiction here, and that is apparently something we can do. Now, it's never been tested before. The Supreme Court will say we can't do that. We'll say we can. That would create a constitutional crisis. But I think we're going to have to start thinking about mechanisms like that to insulate our legislation from this court that is so obviously partisan and trying to knock us down. So we're kind of repeating the 1930s right now when Roosevelt FDR faced that very, very biased court and hoping that they back down, we can create structural changes. But it's not lost on me that this is a huge fight we're in. This is going to be a decades-long fight we're in to try to restore this country. But I'm in it. We're ready to fight, and we'll continue thinking outside the box and thinking about ways we can to take back this country and its democratic institutions, including the Supreme Court.
Okay, I think we're going to do one more question. I think the food's almost ready. Well, maybe two. Oh, okay.
Hello, Dave. Always a pleasure to see you. As you know, I'm on the DNC, and I was assigned to be on the task force for branding and messaging, which we are meeting regularly. For me, it's a lot about the affordability crisis as well as corruption.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to do a better job as Democrats too, like Republicans, in really getting down. And again, we're working on that. What you think will unify voters for 2026 and 2028?
Yeah. So I agree that affordability is the top concern of voters right now. But I think close behind, and I see this in some polling, and I see it when I talk to people, or I hear it when I talk to people, are corruption, as you mentioned. But the third leg of that stool that I don't hear us talk enough about right now is the jobs situation. And right now, the employment numbers are actually very good, despite Trump's terrible policies, and we are losing some jobs. But overall, unemployment is very low. But what I think it gets lost in that equation is how many people are in jobs where they're seen as dead-end jobs. And they don't see anything on the horizon that looks like a pathway upwards to making more money, to getting more prestige or whatever else. And so as a classic example, 3 days ago, I was having lunch out, and my lunch companions were like, this is Congressman Davidman, pointing me out to our server. I don't typically like that, if any of you have lunch with me in the future. But our server and I got to talking, and I asked her, how long have you been in Irvine? She said 9 years. And I said, did you go to school here? No, but I came down here for work. I said, what did you do? Turns out she was general manager of a construction company. She'd gotten a degree in mechanical engineering and a master's degree, and now she's serving at a restaurant. She's like, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful to have this job, but it's not what I trained for. It's not what I studied for. It's not what I got my postgraduate degree for. And unfortunately, I think that story is really one that we see throughout society. I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to where their college graduates are coming home to live with them, and some of you or your grandkids might have this experience right now, and they're working at Starbucks, they're working, at Nordstrom's, they have jobs, but they're not the jobs they studied for, and I worry that we have a crisis on our hands. I think this is a big part of the reason why young people are tuning out, and they just don't feel like they have any hope. So I think we have to do something around jobs. I think we're going to have to figure out some meaningful policies on AI and the disruption it's going to create to our workforce. I think we need to do something on costs, and I think the easiest ones there are obviously overturning the tariffs and the war in Iran. That will immediately lower a lot of prices. But we have to go further than that and try to, undo some of what's happened with the supply chain, think about our relationship with China. But again, it's not just costs, and that's the one of the things I've been preaching for the last few months. Costs are part of it, but you think about the average household. If they thought they were going to make a lot more money, they might be okay with higher costs. It's the fact that they don't see any relief on the horizon as far as increased income. Everything is continuing to rise in prices. Oh, and by the way, there's no solutions coming from Washington because everyone in Washington, D.C. is bought and sold by special interests. That is, I think, the feeling that many Americans have about politics right now in the state of the country. So I think we have to address all three at once, and there's obviously a whole bunch of policies we can look at. But I think ultimately these are going to be unifying, even if some of them may piss off like some of the lobbyists and special interests that kind of dominate discussion in D.C. Thank you very much.